7 polo shirt brands are charging you for a logo while the collar falls apart after 3 washes. And the worst part, one of them costs $110 and uses the same fabric construction as a $12 fast fashion tee. The polo shirt wall is one of the most logo-dependent purchases in men's clothing. Every brand promises timeless, every tag shows heritage and tradition, but flip it inside out, check the seams, read the fabric label, and a completely different product starts talking. Today we're exposing 7 brands you should walk straight past, counting down to the worst offender, a polo that has been the default in men's closets for over 50 years while delivering a garment that structurally cannot hold its shape past a single season. Then we're revealing 3 brands that actually build a polo shirt the way it's supposed to be built. Every fact in this video comes directly from the garment itself, the fabric tag, the seam construction, the collar. Let's get into it. Number 7. Guess Polo Shirts. The one banking entirely on the triangle. Guess built its polo line around one visual element, that inverted triangle logo sitting on the chest. Not the fabric, not the fit, not the collar engineering. The logo. It's the only reason this polo exists in its current form at its current price, and it's doing virtually all of the convincing at the point of purchase. Pick one up and feel the fabric between your fingers. There's a thinness to it that becomes impossible to ignore once you've handled anything constructed with actual intention. The piqué weave, the signature texture that defines what a polo shirt is supposed to feel like, is loose and shallow. The loops that should create that dimensional, almost waffle-like surface are barely formed. What you're touching is a t-shirt masquerading as a polo by using the loosest possible interpretation of the knit. The fabric composition confirms exactly what your fingers already told you. Cotton-polyester blend. Not a performance blend engineered for moisture management with a specific technical purpose. A cost blend. Polyester is cheaper than cotton per yard. When it appears in a garment at this price point without any performance claim attached to it, it's there for one reason: margin. The collar is the structural tell. After 2 or 3 wash cycles, it begins to curl inward at the points. That curl is not wear. That is a collar constructed with a fused interlining, a thin adhesive bonded fabric glued inside the collar to make it feel stiff on the hanger. Fused interlinings break down with heat and moisture. Every wash weakens the bond, every dryer cycle accelerates the separation. The collar was never engineered to maintain its shape through regular use. It was engineered to look correct at the moment of purchase, and that's where the engineering budget ended, $50 to $65. For a garment whose primary structural element, the collar, begins failing within weeks of regular wear. The triangle is doing the selling. The garment underneath it isn't doing much of anything. The next brand charges roughly the same and gives you even less reason to believe anything has been considered beyond the label. Number 6. Calvin Klein Polo Shirts. The one that confuses minimalism with absence. Calvin Klein polos occupy a strange position. They're priced like a considered garment, $55 to $70, packaged with that signature CK restraint, clean lines, muted tones, understated logo placement. The visual message is deliberate simplicity. What's actually inside is just simple. The fabric is thin, not lightweight engineered for breathability thin, thin in the way that tells you the knit gauge was chosen to reduce material cost per unit. Hold one up to any light source and you'll see through it. A polo shirt is an outer garment. If ambient light passes through the body panel, the fabric weight is insufficient for the garment's basic function. The fit is the secondary failure, and it compounds the fabric problem. Calvin Klein cuts these with a straight body that doesn't account for any actual human torso shape, no taper from chest to waist, no consideration for how the shirt drapes when arms are at rest versus in motion. It hangs from the shoulders like it was designed on a flat pattern table and never adjusted after being placed on a body. On anyone with a remotely athletic build, the midsection balloons. On thinner frames, it simply hangs without making contact with the torso at all. The buttons are lightweight plastic, the kind that crack if you apply pressure from the wrong angle. The buttonhole stitching is functional but sparse. Fewer stitches per centimeter means more stress concentrated on each individual thread, which means the buttonhole begins to elongate and loosen faster. The seams are single needle serged. This is the fastest, cheapest method of joining 2 pieces of fabric in garment manufacturing. It works, it holds, but it offers no reinforcement at stress points, the underarm junction, the shoulder seam where the sleeve meets the body, the side vents if they exist at all. These are the locations where a polo shirt experiences the most mechanical stress during normal movement, and Calvin Klein applies the same construction method to these high-stress zones as it does to the bottom hem. You're paying for the name's association with a design philosophy the garment itself doesn't execute. The minimalism on the outside isn't a reflection of refined construction on the inside, it's a reflection of how little was invested beyond the branding. Number 5. Tommy Hilfiger polo shirts. The ones still living off a decade it didn't build. Tommy Hilfiger polos cost $50 to $80. That price range communicates something very specific to the person reaching for one. It says this is above basic, this is a brand with genuine heritage. This is the polo that sits between the mass market tier and the actual luxury tier, offering the best of both. Accessible but credible, familiar but premium. Now look at what you're actually holding. The fabric is a cotton-elastane blend on most styles. Elastane in a polo shirt is a choice that requires scrutiny. In a well-constructed garment using quality long staple cotton, the natural properties of the fiber provide enough recovery and drape that elastane isn't necessary. Elastane shows up in polo shirts when the base cotton doesn't have enough inherent structure to maintain its shape through a wearing cycle. It's a corrective additive. The stretch you feel isn't a feature, it's a compensation for a cotton quality that couldn't perform on its own. The collar uses that same fused interlining construction. It looks structured on the rack. It photographs well in the fitting room mirror. Give it 8 to 10 washes, and the collar points begin their predictable inward curl, and once that curl begins, it does not reverse. The collar is now permanently deformed, and the polo transitions from a garment you'd wear with intention to one that lives in the back rotation. The logo is where Tommy makes its real play. That flag emblem on the chest isn't a small detail. It's engineered at a specific size, at a specific position, to be visible at conversational distance. You are not wearing a polo shirt. You are wearing a Tommy Hilfiger advertisement that happens to have sleeves. The garment exists as a delivery system for that flag. The stitching density throughout is average at best. The hems are standard fold and stitch. The side vents, where they exist, receive no reinforcement beyond the same stitch used on the body seams. Pull gently at the vent, and you can feel how little is holding it together. At $50 to $80, Tommy Hilfiger is charging a premium tier price for a garment built with entry-level construction, held together by consumer nostalgia for an era the brand has been referencing on repeat for 20 years without meaningfully evolving the product that sits behind it. The brand coming up next does the same thing at an even lower price point and doesn't pretend otherwise, which almost makes it more honest and somehow equally disappointing. Number 4. H&M polo shirts. The genuinely cheap one that performs exactly like it costs. H&M polos cost $12 to $20. At that price, expectations should be calibrated accordingly. And to be fair, H&M doesn't wrap this product in heritage mythology or premium positioning. It's a polo shirt on a hanger at a price that asks almost nothing from you at checkout. What you get matches that ask precisely. The fabric is cotton polyester in most styles, and unlike brands higher on this list, the polyester content here is high enough to fundamentally change how the garment feels against skin. There's a synthetic slickness to it, a slight sheen under certain lighting that cotton alone never produces. It doesn't breathe in any meaningful scents. After 30 minutes of wear in any temperature above moderate, the fabric begins holding heat and moisture against the body, rather than releasing it. The PK knit is the loosest interpretation of the term you'll encounter in this entire video. The texture that should define a polo shirt as visually and tactily distinct from a t-shirt is so flattened and compressed that the garment effectively is a t-shirt with a collar attached. The characteristic dimensional surface simply isn't present. Sizing is inconsistent across colors within the same stated size. A medium in navy and a medium in white from the same rack can differ by over an inch in chest width. This is a quality control issue that happens when cutting tolerances are wide and inspection standards are minimal. It means you cannot order this polo online with any confidence that it will fit the way the last one did. There's one thing worth noting. H&M is not lying to you. The price is honest. The positioning is honest. Nobody picks up a $15 polo expecting a garment that will define their wardrobe for years, but honest pricing doesn't make a poor garment worth wearing. A polo shirt that pills after 4 washes, loses shape after 6, and lives in a donation bag by month 3 isn't inexpensive. It's a recurring expense disguised as a low price. You'll buy 3 of these in the time a properly made polo is still in your regular rotation. The next brand takes significantly more money from you and returns approximately the same garment lifespan wrapped in dramatically more convincing packaging. Number 3. Hugo Boss Polo Shirts. The one that charges you for the office it rents, not the shirt it makes. Hugo Boss polos range from $80 to $130. At that price, you have crossed out of the casual purchase zone entirely. $100 and above for a polo shirt is a statement. It communicates to the buyer that this garment has been constructed with a level of care, material quality, and design intentionality that justifies the ask. Hugo Boss knows this, and Hugo Boss has gotten extraordinarily good at communicating that message without consistently delivering on it. The fabric on most Boss polos is a mercerized cotton or a cotton-elastane blend, depending on the line. Mercerized cotton is genuinely a superior treatment. It increases luster, improves dye uptake, and adds a subtle smoothness to the hand feel. That treatment is real. What's also real is that mercerization does not compensate for a low thread count or a thin knit gauge. You can mercerize an average cotton fabric and it will look and feel better on first touch while remaining structurally average underneath the surface treatment. That is what's happening here. The collar, and this is the detail that should matter most at this price, is better than the sub-$70 tier, but not by the margin the price implies. Boss uses a ribbed knit collar on many styles rather than the fully fused interlining found lower on this list. That's a meaningful improvement. Ribbed collars maintain their shape through washing significantly better, but the density of the rib is moderate. Not the tight, thick, almost architectural collar construction you find on genuinely premium polos that treat the collar as the single most important structural element of the garment, which it is. The body construction is clean but unexceptional. Seams are finished neatly, hems are even. There's nothing overtly wrong with how the garment is assembled, but there's also nothing that distinguishes it from what a competent manufacturer could produce at half the wholesale cost. You are not paying for the sewing, you are paying for the label that gets sewn in. The logo placement has shifted over the years toward more visible, more prominent positioning. That shift is not a design decision driven by aesthetics, it's a business decision driven by brand visibility. A larger logo at the chest creates more impressions per wear. Each time someone wearing a Boss polo enters a room, walks through an airport, sits across a table, the brand is being advertised. You paid $110 for the privilege of doing that advertising. At this price, the expectation should be a garment that justifies itself through construction, fabric, and longevity, independent of the name on it. Remove the Boss label and hand this polo to someone blind. They would estimate its value at $40 to $55. That gap between perceived value and construction value is Hugo Boss's entire business model in this category. 2 more on the avoid list. Then we get into the 3 that are actually built to deserve what they charge. The best one on that list might genuinely change what you expect from this garment. Number 2, Lacoste Polo Shirts. The one that invented the category and forgot to keep earning it. Lacoste invented the modern polo shirt. René Lacoste, 1933, the tennis court, the crocodile. That story is real, and it has been doing the work of selling this polo for over 90 years. The problem is that the story was written 9 decades ago, and the product sitting on the shelf today has drifted considerably from what that story implies. The classic Lacoste L1212 is the model most people picture when they think of this brand. It's the one with the petite piqué knit, the ribbed collar and sleeve bands, the 2-button placket, and the crocodile embroidered at the chest. That formula, on paper, is what a polo shirt is supposed to be. Lacoste defined it. The execution in 2024 is where the gap opens. The piqué is noticeably lighter in weight than what Lacoste produced in earlier decades. Side-by-side comparisons with vintage L1212 models from the 1990s and earlier show a measurable reduction in fabric density. The loops of the piqué knit are shorter and less defined. The overall hand feel is softer but in a way that signals less material per square meter, not a deliberate refinement of the weave. The collar and sleeve bands are ribbed, which is structurally correct and better than fused interlining by a significant margin. But the rib tension has loosened over successive production cycles. On current models, the collar doesn't sit as firmly against the neck as it once did. There's a slight looseness that becomes more apparent after washing. It doesn't fully curl the way a fused collar does, but it doesn't hold a crisp, defined line either. It occupies a middle ground that feels like a compromise between cost reduction and maintaining just enough of the original structural identity to avoid customer complaints. The fit has been updated multiple times across different markets, and it shows. Depending on where the specific unit was manufactured and which fit variant you pulled from the rack, the same labeled size can range from genuinely slim to boxy. That inconsistency in a heritage product at this price is not acceptable. You're paying for a garment whose entire identity is built on consistency and precision, and the sizing cannot be relied upon. $90 to $120 for a polo that genuinely invented the form and is now delivering a version of it that relies almost entirely on that invention story to justify why it still costs what it does. The crocodile is carrying the full weight of that price tag. And a logo, no matter how storied its origin, is not a structural component. The brand at number one has been running a nearly identical strategy for even longer, at an even larger scale, in an even more dominant market position. And it is, by a considerable distance, the single most purchased polo shirt on earth. Number one, Ralph Lauren Polo. The one that's been in your closet since before you were choosing your own clothes. Ralph Lauren introduced the polo shirt in 1972. Over 50 years on the same racks in virtually every department store, every outlet mall, and every online retailer in the Western world. That kind of presence doesn't happen because a product is the best constructed garment in its category. It happens because a product becomes the default, and defaults, once established, are almost impossible to displace. You don't choose Ralph Lauren Polo. You reach for it the way you reach for anything that has occupied the same space in your visual field for your entire adult life. Your father wore it. It was in the department store the first time someone took you shopping for something with a collar. It is the answer to the question, I need a polo shirt, in the same way that a specific brand of toothpaste is the answer to, I need toothpaste. Not because you evaluated it, because it was there. In that time, Ralph Lauren has perfected one specific outcome, producing a polo shirt that feels familiar enough that you never develop a strong enough opinion about it to stop buying it. That is not quality, that is inertia, and it is a calculated commercial achievement. The fabric on the standard mesh polo, Ralph Lauren's highest volume polo product, is a cotton mesh knit, not piqué, mesh. These are different constructions. Piqué is the structured, textured, dimensionally stable knit that defines what a polo shirt is supposed to be. Mesh is an open-hole knit that is lighter, cheaper to produce, less durable, and structurally less capable of maintaining its shape through repeated wear and washing. Ralph Lauren uses mesh on its flagship polo and calls the garment iconic. The knit construction doesn't support the word. The collar is the failure point that defines this product. It is a two-button placket with a collar that uses a light fused interlining and minimal rib support. After a handful of washes, the collar points begin to curl. After a full season of regular wear and laundering, the curl becomes permanent. The collar that looked sharp on the store mannequin now rolls inward and will not lay flat regardless of ironing, steaming, or any intervention you attempt. A polo shirt whose collar can't stay flat isn't performing its primary visual function. That's not a wear preference. That's a product failure for a garment that cost $90 to $110. Here's the number that reframes this polo completely. The standard Ralph Lauren Polo retails between $90 and $110 depending on the colorway and the retail channel. The fabric weight, the seam construction, the button quality, and the collar engineering are functionally comparable to polos available from brands charging $30 to $45. The gap between those two numbers is not explained by superior materials, it is not explained by superior construction. It is explained entirely by a small embroidered horse on the left chest. That pony has been the most effective logo in men's casual wear for half a century. It communicates an aspirational lifestyle that the garment itself does not need to deliver on because the logo already delivered the feeling at the point of sale. You didn't buy a polo shirt. You bought the idea of the polo shirt that Ralph Lauren showed you, and the garment is just the physical object the logo needed to be attached to. Ralph Lauren Polo is the most purchased polo shirt on the planet. That fact tells you considerably more about how men actually shop for clothing than it tells you about how this polo actually performs. Now that you know what to walk past, here's what to reach for instead. These three brands looked at the same fabric options, the same manufacturing cost pressures, and the same retail shelf competition and made fundamentally different decisions. Those decisions show up on the fabric tag first. They show up on your body immediately after. Best option number 3. Uniqlo Dry Piqué Polo. The clean mid-price choice that proves the $30 tier doesn't have to mean disposable. Uniqlo doesn't sell you a story. There's no heritage narrative, no borrowed European legacy, no lifestyle imagery designed to make you feel like you're buying membership in a social class. Uniqlo sells fabric technology and garment construction at a price point that makes the entire aspirational markup model look structurally absurd. The dry piqué polo uses a cotton blend piqué with Uniqlo's dry moisture wicking treatment. This is a performance-oriented fabric decision with a stated technical purpose, and that distinction matters. When polyester or synthetic fiber appears in a polo shirt alongside a specific functional claim, moisture management, quick dry capability, UV protection, it's there to solve a problem. When it appears without any claim at all, it's there to save money. Uniqlo states the function and delivers on it. The shirt manages moisture meaningfully better than any pure cotton polo in this video across both lists. The collar is the detail that has no business being this good at this price. It's a ribbed knit collar with a density that holds its shape through repeated machine washing, without curling, without softening into shapelessness, without requiring careful laundering to maintain its line. Ralph Lauren charges 3 times as much and delivers a collar that fails this test within a month. That comparison alone should fundamentally recalibrate what you're willing to pay for a logo. The fit is slim without being restrictive. There's a light taper from the chest to the waist that follows the natural line of the torso without clinging. Arms sit cleanly within the sleeve without excess material bunching at the bicep. It looks intentional on the body, in a way that many polos 3 and 4 times this price simply do not, because Uniqlo invests in fit engineering at the pattern level, rather than relying on brand cachet to make the wearer feel good about an average silhouette. The seam construction is clean, not exceptional, not handmade artisan level. Clean, side seams are neatly serged, hems are even, the stitching is consistent, nothing about the construction suggests a garment that costs $30, and nothing about it pretends to be something it isn't. $25 to $30, the same price as a single Calvin Klein or Guess polo that will be in a donation bag before this Uniqlo is out of its first rotation. If every man who has ever paid $100 for a Ralph Lauren Polo tried this shirt once, the entire pricing structure of this category would collapse overnight. That hasn't happened yet, only because Uniqlo doesn't attach a lifestyle to the hanger. It just puts a properly built polo shirt on it and lets you decide. What comes next shows what this same construction-first philosophy looks like when a brand pushes every element of it further, significantly further, into genuinely premium territory. Best option number 2. Sunspel Riviera Polo. The one that changed what a polo shirt was allowed to be. Sunspel has been manufacturing in England since 1860. That's not a marketing claim borrowed from someone else's history. That's continuous operation. And unlike brands that reference their heritage as a substitute for current product quality, Sunspel's heritage is visible in the garment you're holding because the construction standards are still active, not archived. The Riviera Polo is the model that matters in this conversation. It's the polo that James Bond wore in Casino Royale, and that detail gets repeated constantly. But it's the least interesting thing about this shirt. What matters is why it was chosen for that role. The Riviera was selected because it is the most visually clean polo shirt available at any price. No visible logo, no emblem, no chest embroidery, nothing on the exterior of this garment exists to tell a stranger what you paid for it. The shirt's entire statement is its fit, its fabric, and its construction. That's it. The fabric is a cotton mesh knit, but categorically different from the mesh used by Ralph Lauren. Sunspel's mesh is a fine-gauge, tight-knit construction with a weight and density that gives the fabric genuine body without thickness. It drapes against the torso with a fluidity that piqué inherently can't achieve, while maintaining enough structure that it never looks limp or insubstantial. The hand feel is cool and smooth with a quality that becomes more obvious over time, not less. This fabric improves with washing. It softens without degrading, the knit tightens slightly rather than stretching out, the collar is unstructured, no interlining, no fusing, no internal stiffening of any kind. It sits flat because the fabric and the cut allow it to sit flat. This is the most difficult collar construction to execute correctly because there's nothing to hide behind. If the pattern is off by millimeters, the collar fails visibly. Sunspel's collar sits cleanly because the pattern is precise and the fabric has been selected specifically to behave correctly in this application, without structural assistance. The seams are finished to a standard that most brands on the avoid list don't approach at any price point. Clean interior finishing, no exposed raw edges. The inside of this shirt looks considered in a way that signals the manufacturer assumed someone would eventually turn it inside out, and they wanted that moment to reinforce the purchase, not undermine it. $120 to $140. That's real money for a polo shirt, and it's worth stating plainly that this is a premium garment at a premium price. What you're paying for is fabric that was selected rather than sourced at the lowest available cost, construction that was executed to a specification rather than a quota, and a fit that was engineered on bodies rather than drafted on paper. Remove every label from every polo mentioned in this video. Hand them to someone blind. Ask them to rank by quality of fabric, construction, and finish. Sunspel would be identified as the most expensive garment in the group because it is the only one where the price is fully explained by what's actually in your hands rather than what's embroidered on the chest. The next option is the only one on this list that pushes the fundamental logic even further, and it asks one very specific thing from you in return. Best option number 1, a made-to-measure or custom polo. The one that wins by fitting only you. Here is what separates a made-to-measure polo from everything else covered in this video. It is not a finished product pulled from a rack of standardized sizes. It makes no attempt to fit every possible body shape using 4 or 5 predetermined patterns, and that is precisely why it ranks first. A custom polo shirt, whether ordered through a bespoke shirting service, a direct-to-consumer made-to-measure brand, or even a skilled local tailor who works with knit fabrics, begins with your measurements, not a size chart, not a small, medium, large spectrum that forces your specific body into the nearest approximate box, your chest, your shoulders, your arm length, your torso taper, the exact dimensions that make your build yours and nobody else's. The result is a polo that fits the way clothing is supposed to fit when it's actually made for the person wearing it. The collar sits where it should because the neck measurement is exact. The shoulders end where your shoulders end because nobody had to guess. The body follows your torso because it was cut to your torso, and the hem falls at the correct point on your hip because that length was specified, not averaged. The fabric is your choice. You're selecting the cotton. You're choosing the weight. You're deciding between piqué and mesh and jersey based on how you want the shirt to feel and move, not based on what a brand's supply chain happened to negotiate at the lowest unit cost for a production run of 50,000 units. Every material decision that was made for you by every other brand on this list, decisions driven by margin, by manufacturing convenience, by cost optimization, you now make yourself based on what you actually want against your skin. The trade-off is straightforward and worth stating clearly. This is not a walk-in, walk-out purchase. You will provide measurements. You will wait for production. You will likely pay $80 to $200 depending on the maker and the fabric. The turnaround is days to weeks, not minutes. That is more involvement than pulling a polo off a rack and tapping a card. What you get at the end is a polo shirt that was never on a hanger next to 40 identical copies of itself in 4 colors. A garment with no logo doing the convincing because the fit is doing all of it. A shirt that will not curl at the collar because the collar was constructed for your neck, not a mannequin's neck. A polo that doesn't need a heritage story, a lifestyle campaign, or an embroidered animal because the garment itself, on your body, is the entire argument. Custom ranks number 1 not because it does everything for you. It ranks number 1 because it gives you the best possible control over every element and steps aside completely. Here's what this investigation actually comes down to. The polo shirt section of every store is designed around one principle, ensuring you look at the logo on the chest before you look at the tag inside the collar. Every design decision, the embroidered animals, the heritage names, the aspirational imagery, the words like classic, iconic, and timeless, exists to generate enough front-of-garment confidence that the fabric composition label, the seam construction, and the collar engineering never get examined. You feel like you already know what you're buying because you recognize the logo. That feeling is the product. That strategy has worked for decades at scale, across hundreds of millions of purchases, for every brand on the avoid list. The brands on that list, Guess, Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, H&M, Hugo Boss, Lacoste, Ralph Lauren, aren't in every store because they make a superior garment. They're there because they got there first. They stayed familiar. And the gap between what the logo on the chest promises and what the fabric tag inside the collar actually delivers has never been made visible at the moment of purchase. At the register, familiarity wins almost every time. The brands on the best list, Uniqlo, Sunspel, and the made-to-measure option, aren't doing anything technically inaccessible. They are using better fabrics and building with more care while leaving out everything that exists to compensate for when neither of those things is actually present. The construction gets better not because they add more, but because there's genuinely less that needs to be compensated for. When the fabric is doing its job correctly, you don't need elastane to fake structure, fused interlining to fake collar rigidity, a lifestyle campaign to fake value, or a logo to fake quality. The garment handles all of it. When the construction is honest, the shirt starts to look and feel like the thing it actually is. That is the entire story of this category condensed to one sentence, one action. Every time you're standing in front of that polo wall from this point forward, flip it inside out before it goes in the cart. Not the logo, not the colorway, the interior. If the collar uses a fused interlining you can feel as a stiff, plasticky layer between the fabric, that collar will curl within weeks and there is no reversing it. If the fabric tag shows a high polyester percentage with no stated performance purpose, a cost decision was made that you're now absorbing. If the seams inside are raw-edged and loosely stitched, the manufacturer assumed you would never look, and they built the garment based on that assumption. You are not being asked to become a textile engineer. You are being asked to check the inside of a shirt someone is selling to you for $110 with a straight face. The brands that deserve your money have nothing on that interior you'd prefer you didn't see. The ones that belong back on the rack are counting on you never checking. You now know exactly what to look for. If there's a polo on that avoid list currently in your closet, you now have 3 specific directions to replace it with. Drop a comment with what you're switching from and what you're reaching for next. Genuinely useful to see what people are actually wearing once they start paying attention.